It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with the headlines. President Park Geun-hye embarks on a three-nation tour of Africa. She is set to become the first Korean leader to address the continent at the African Union headquarters. Monaco becomes the first country to submit a report on the latest sanctions targeting North Korea, which could provide valuable information on how effective the latest measures are. STX, one of South Korea's biggest shipyards, is set to be placed under court-led restructuring. Its main creditors have confirmed they won't provide additional financial support since the company will not be able to repay its debt. President Park Geun-hye is off on a historic trip to Africa. First stop, Ethiopia, where Seoul will unveil a new aid project and a new vision for the continent. Song Ji-sun gives us a preview of the three-nation tour.
President Park's departure Wednesday coincides with Africa Day, an annual commemoration that celebrates the unity of the continent. Covering the three biggest economies in East Africa, President Park seeks to strengthen economic and development partnership with the continent, considered the last blue ocean in the world with growth of 5% in the 21st century. Seoul will assist Africa with customized development programs while sharing its experience for mutual growth. President Park will further elaborate on her new vision for Africa on Friday in a speech at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, making her the first Korean leader to address the continent.
In addition to our diplomacy and official development assistance, Seoul will lay out its vision for Africa in peace and security, mutual growth through economic cooperation, new development models, as well as cultural exchanges.
Seoul is set to unveil its Korea Aid project in Ethiopia, an official development assistance program on wheels offering healthcare and cultural contents. Spreading Hallyu, or the Korean wave, across the African continent, the Korea Aid vehicles will show videos ranging from taekwondo to K-pop and introduce the 2018 Winter Olympic Games in Pyeongchang. Before President Park leaves for Uganda and Kenya, a business forum will also be held to help our delegation discover the great potential of Ethiopia. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
While in Africa, President Park is expected to share some of South Korea's economic success stories, while also enhancing diplomatic relations with the three countries on her itinerary. Hang Ho-jun tells us more.
With increasing political stability, economic growth, and projected middle class of 500 million by 2030, many call Africa the final untapped growth engine of the global community. Recognizing that potential, the U.S., China, and Japan's heads of state have already visited several African countries. President Park Geun-hye will follow suit to become the fourth South Korean leader to make a visit. She intends to establish business and possibly military cooperation and to launch Korea Aid, an official development assistance program mobilizing special trucks to provide food, health checkups, and cultural contents to people in Africa. Let's take a closer look at some of the main agenda items to be discussed with each country. President Park's first stop, Ethiopia. What's significant here is that Ethiopia is the only African country to have deployed ground troops to Korea during the Korean War. This would be the second time a Korean leader has visited the country since diplomatic relations were established in 1963. With the history, some of the main issues that will be talked about between President Park and the leaders of Ethiopia, including President Mulatu Teshome and Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn, is increasing trade and investment and enhancing cooperation in national defense, peacekeeping operations, and healthcare. She will also visit the African Union headquarters to meet with key members of the Commission, including its chair, Madame Nkosazana Zuma, before delivering a speech to introduce Korea's new policy vision for the continent. Next, the president will travel to Uganda. Now, this is the first time the leader of Korea visiting the country since the establishment of diplomatic ties in 1963. The Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni actually was the first head of state to visit Korea after President Park took office in 2013. Together, they will discuss to seek enhanced cooperation between the two countries to tackle the North Korean nuclear issue, as Uganda is known to be a foothold for North Korea in East Africa. Having displayed interest in Saemaul Undong, the political initiative to modernize the Korean rural economy in the 1970s, President Museveni will join President Park on her Saemaul-related activities during the visit. The last stop, President Park's African trip, is Kenya. which will mainly focus on enhancing economic relations of the two countries. It's interesting to note that the fathers of both President Park and Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta were in office when the two countries first established diplomatic relations in 1964. Once she completes her visit in Africa, President Park will head to Paris the following Wednesday for a state visit marking 130 years of diplomatic relations with France. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Also, the president's focus during that trip will be on strengthening economic ties and boosting development. All three countries on our itinerary happen to be beneficiaries of Seoul's International Development Aid Program. Woo Soo-young reports.
Sub-Saharan Africa is home to the poorest countries in the world, with almost half of its inhabitants living in extreme poverty. Exposed to adverse climate conditions, tropical diseases and regional conflicts, the area struggles to improve basic livelihood, health, education and job security. To help meet these needs, Korea has been providing Official Development Assistance, or ODA, through its official aid agency since 1991. With the Seoul Declaration in 2009, it strengthened support, pledging to double foreign aid to African countries and produce 2 policy frameworks on development in the region. Since then, aid to the continent has steadily increased, nearing $120 million in 2014.
Our projects focus on agricultural development as well as healthcare and education. Not only do we set up the infrastructure, but we also empower locals with the confidence that they can beat poverty.
There are currently 16 beneficiary countries in the continent, and President Park will be visiting 3 of them. Ethiopia is the biggest beneficiary of Korea's ODA in Africa, with major projects including water management, health, agriculture and infrastructure. Total aid reached more than $88 million as of 2014. In Uganda, the majority of projects focus on lifting locals out of poverty by increasing agricultural productivity and income. Over the years, Korean aid has added up to $27 million. In Kenya, water security, education and governance are the top priorities, and the total amount of aid by 2014 reached almost $40 million. Experts say Korea's involvement in these countries have been well received, despite the lower amount of ODA compared to those of other developed countries.
It is not only the recipient countries appreciating it, but also other donor agencies in Europe and the USA, even international institutions. African countries, especially in the Horn of Africa, they have a very similar factor endowment like what Korea had in 1960s. So they have a very limited natural resources, but plenty of people. So we can share Korean development experience with those countries so that they can catch up faster.
Korea will further its commitment to African development during President Park's trip, unveiling a brand new initiative called KoreaAid. Woo Soo-young, Arirang News.
No off days for President Park. She will be on the move again after completing her trip to Africa, and the next destination will be France, where her visit will coincide with the 130th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Korea and France. Ahead of her visit, let's take a look at some of the significant moments between the two countries. Here's Kim Hye-sung.
Korea and France marked the beginning of diplomatic relations in 1886 with the Treaty of Friendship, Commerce and Navigation. Later, during the Korean War, France fought alongside the South, sending more than 3,400 soldiers. Since then, the two countries have cooperated on major global issues including climate change and North Korea. On the economic front, bilateral ties can be divided into 4 phases. In the 1970s, when Korea was focused on development, 70 French companies helped build power plants and roads in the country. Around the 1988 Seoul Olympic Games, French companies in consumer goods and insurance entered Korea. The Asian financial crisis was another turning point with mergers and joint ventures such as the one that produced Renault Samsung Motors. Chairman of the French-Korean Chamber of Commerce and Industry explains the last phase.
2011, the fair trade agreement between Europe and Korea, and this did increase a lot the exchange. For example, at that time we were 200 companies in our organization, and today, 5 years after this agreement, we are 350.
Cultural exchanges began with the opening of cultural centers in the late 1960s. Since then, Koreans have come to appreciate French literature and cuisine. More recently, the Korean wave, or Hallyu, has ignited French people's interest in Korean culture.
I've been working hard for the past 15 years to tell French people more about Korea. In recent years, I've seen their interest in Korean culture, fashion, and literature soar.
Given all that Korean and French people are learning about one another through bilateral relationships so far, ties between the two countries are expected to grow even stronger in the years to come. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Monaco has filed its implementation report on the UN sanctions against North Korea, becoming the first country to submit the action plan. The report could provide clues about the effectiveness of the sanctions, as could the latest defection by a group of North Korean restaurant workers in China. For details, let's turn to our Oh Jung-hee.
Monaco has become the first country to report on its implementation of the latest UN sanctions on North Korea. The details of the report are not yet known, and it'll take some time for the full version to be disclosed, as it has to be translated into UN official languages. When the details are released, it'll provide an indication of the effectiveness of the global efforts to pressure North Korea. Already, it seems the sanctions are having an impact, as seen with recent cases of defections by North Korean restaurant workers in China. The most recent case was confirmed by Seoul on Monday, where it said an unspecified number of North Koreans had escaped. According to sources familiar with North Korea, the defectors left a Pyongyang-run restaurant in Xi'an, Shanxi province and are now waiting in Thailand. This marks the second group defection in less than 2 months after 13 North Koreans defected from a Chinese restaurant in Ningbo. The latest UN Security Council sanctions on North Korea are the strongest ever, and the sanctions resolution was adopted after Pyongyang carried out its 4th nuclear test in January and long-range missile launch in February. UN member countries are required to report on the sanctions that they have and will implement within 90 days of the resolution's adoption. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
South Korea's Defense Minister Han Min-gu will head to Singapore next month to attend the annual Asia Security Summit. The regional security meeting, also known as the Shangri-La Dialogue, held from June 3rd to the 5th, will also have a special session on North Korea, among the other regional issues on the table. Han said he plans to hold trilateral talks with his counterparts from the U.S. and Japan, and will meet on the sidelines with defense chiefs from China, France, and Switzerland. With the new 20th National Assembly starting next week, the Speaker of the outgoing one, wrapped up his 2-year term with a farewell press conference. Our parliamentary correspondent Park Ji-won tells us more.
Assembly Speaker Chung Ui-hwa, a 5-term lawmaker and former neurosurgeon, held a farewell press conference on Wednesday. Speaking to reporters, Chung said 2 of the 19th National Assembly's biggest achievements were the passage of reforms to the public servant pension system and a strict anti-corruption law. But he expressed regret over the controversy that surrounded a revision to the National Assembly Act that would allow for more frequent parliamentary hearings. There's growing speculation that the president might veto the revision on the grounds that frequent hearings could hamper the government's ability to conduct state affairs. On such perspective, Chung defended the bill, saying that having more hearings would lead to quicker answers to current social issues. He also said it is the parliament's constitutional right to scrutinize the government representing the general public.
The people want a conscientious parliament that properly keeps tabs on the government. Opposing the revision of the Assembly Act, which aims to make the executive branch work harder by standing by the people's side, is nothing but damaging the principle of democracy.
The Speaker also said the so-called National Assembly Advancement Act, which requires 3/5 support of lawmakers to pass a law, needs to be modified. The act was first put into practice during the 19th Assembly to take into account the opinions of minor parties, but it was also largely blamed for parliamentary deadlocks, which were often seen during the outgoing Assembly.
As I was running the 19th Assembly, I witnessed many negative side effects of the act, including how impossible it was to practice politics with responsibility. Even when the ruling Saenuri party had parliamentary majority, the party could not push through its agenda due to the act.
The speaker added that as he leaves his post now, he wishes the 20th National Assembly to be the place for concerted efforts by the three main parties to achieve politics of cooperation. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Main creditors of STX, Korea's former number 4 shipyard, says they are done reviving the ailing shipbuilding company. According to Kim Ji-yeon, this could be the first of many such actions by other creditors and the shipbuilding industry, which is suffering from heavy debt following a years-long slump.
One of Korea's biggest shipyards, STX Offshore and Shipbuilding Company, is likely to go bankrupt by the end of May, as creditors decided to end their years-long efforts to revamp the slumping shipping and shipbuilding industry. The ailing company's main creditors, led by state-run Korea Development Bank, or KDB, said Wednesday that they reached a consensus to place the shipyard under court-led restructuring this month. KDB dismissed the possibility of providing additional financial support, saying it would put the creditors at great risk of exposure, as it is nearly impossible for the company to repay its debt. KDB estimates STX Shipbuilding, once the country's fourth largest shipyard, would need around $592 million to up to $1 billion to avoid bankruptcy, and that's considering the shipyard could finish its remaining orders by next year. Main creditors have also referred to past unsuccessful attempts to resuscitate STX Shipbuilding. Despite receiving around $3.4 billion of aid from its creditors for more than 3 years since 2013, the company couldn't avoid recording operating losses of hundreds of millions to $billions a year. The creditors' latest move could send a ripple effect to the rest of the country's ailing shipbuilding industry. The amount of bank loans lent to shipbuilders is estimated to have reached a combined $59.2 billion, with nearly 80% of them coming from the country's top 3 shipyards: Hyundai Heavy Industries, Samsung Heavy Industries, and Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
That's all from us for now. Thank you for watching.